Descartes writes this book, The Passions of the Soul, in part to address some of the gaps in his philosophy. By the time that he writes this, he's well established. He's written the Meditations, the Discourse on Method, which was appended to a bunch of other works. He mentions his Optics in here. That was one of the works that the Discourse on Method was appended to. He's got a well worked out idea of how the mind and body work and how they connect with each other, but he hasn't laid out some parts of it. And one thing that you find in systematic philosophy is treatments of the emotions. What's going on when we feel things? Not just like, feel things like I'm feeling, touching myself here, or if I do this, really hard, I'd feel a sense of pain. What's going on when I feel sadness or happiness or anger or desire, things like that? The stuff that makes us tick. Our emotions are an incredibly important part of ourselves. What I'm going to be doing, in large part with the board today, is sort of sketching out a model of the human being and how parts of us interact with other parts. So Descartes starts out by thinking in terms of the human being as being the union of two things. Body and soul, or actually let me move this over a little bit. You may be more comfortable with this term, mind. How do the mind and the body connect up together? Because clearly they're not exactly the same thing. Your perception of sight, think about what you remember from whenever you learned this, biology, health class, maybe other classes that you took. What's going on when you actually see things? Light is coming into your eyes, and what's happening then? Does it just go straight from your eyes into your brain? What happens?
Well, I don't know specifically, but your mind is processing the image of what you see.
Mm-hmm. That's part of what's going on. And there's flips taking place, The eyeballs are connected by this big, thick set of nerves that goes into the brain. It's pretty complicated. The eye itself is pretty complicated. It's got all these rods and cones. And are any of you colorblind in any way? Like red, green, or whatever the other kinds are? If you were, what that is some of the things in your eyes, those I forget whether it's the rods or cones, aren't distinguishing things the way they ought to. They're not picking up on certain signals coming in from the environment. Any of you have trouble with night vision? If you do, you should probably eat carrots. That helps you out. When you get a little bit older, your night vision starts to go. That's a matter of the physiology of the eye. And then it gets transmitted into electrical impulses through this nerve, and it goes into the brain. And your brain, we know now, is way more complicated than Descartes thought it was. Because, Descartes is working with the science of his time. We now know it's composed of these special cells. What are they called? You remember? Starts with an N. Yeah. Neurons. And do you ever look at one of those? They're really kind of hideous things. All sorts of little tubes going off in different directions. But those have a function, right? What do they transmit? This is what Descartes didn't understand, because he thought it was in terms of animal spirits. Nobody talks about adjusting your animal spirit balance these days, right? Electricity. Your brain is full of electrical impulses, and these neurons connect up with each other in complicated ways, in ways that we're still trying to figure out. Now, all of that stuff being there and happening, is that what it's like to see? Take for instance that hat. 4 colors, right? Red, white, light blue, and dark blue. Or gray, perhaps, I don't know. Maybe the light is bad, or I'm misperceiving it. Are there little red neurons that are being triggered inside of your head, and then when that switch flips it says red inside your head? it's not really like that. The perception that you have is something mental that you experience. What's going on in your mind is something different than what's going on in your body. They're connected up with each other. The body does, in fact, act on the mind. You're hearing my voice right now. Sound waves are hitting your ears. Your ears are going through this whole long, difficult to describe process, and those electrical impulses are shooting up through your nerves, not very far, because they're right on the side of your head, into your brain. Your brain is doing a few things with those to process those, and your mind registers that as sound. Does your brain register that as a human voice that is communicating meaning? Maybe to a certain extent it plays a role in that. But where do you actually understand the meaning of my words? With your mind. Not just with your brain. With your mind. And, you can ask questions, well, what the hell is that? How does that work? And Descartes, willing to say, we observe this. We don't really, at bottom, know exactly what it is, but we know that we have this. Now think about this. Does your mind affect your body too? Can you think about doing something and then do it? Like come to class? Or, jump up and down or work out, things like that? Yeah, your mind can tell your body what to do. Your mind also is able to do something different, which is to reflect upon itself. And of course your body can do things to itself too, can't it? Like what happens when you don't eat enough? Have any of you ever had to fast for one reason or another? Or you've been hungry because you screwed something up and you don't have a lunch ticket at lunch, or forgot to pack a lunch, or it's a crisis and you can't eat for a day or two or something like that. What does your body start feeling like that? What's it like to be hungry? Really hungry. Not just like what they call mouth hungry, where you're bored and you want something to stick in your mouth. Yeah.
Kind of like sore, I guess.
Sore, okay, yeah. Have any of you felt hunger pangs, they call them? Not pains, hunger pangs, like in here, you actually it hurts a bit. You start feeling lethargic. It's hard to concentrate. You get irritable with people. These are all phenomenal effects of hunger. And something's going on in your body. Your body is sending, signals, not just to your mind, but to other parts of your body. Feed us, or we're going to die. Not right away, but sooner or later. So get some food in us as soon as you can. What happens when you're scared? Something startles you. Like, for example, we were joking around in the beginning of class about a spider. This is a scary thing. Spider dropping down right in front of you, like when you're trying to drink water, right in front of your face. Now imagine that. And you had this metaphor of like, for a second it was as big as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. What does that actually mean? Obviously you didn't think it was as big as a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
It was that close.
Yeah, perspective. I suppose if you're right there, right, things do look bigger when you're closer to them. But what happens to your body when you have that fear response? What goes on? What do you experience? What's that?
Pain.
Pain?
Pain.
Oh, you panic. Okay, so what is that like? What does panic look like or feel like?
Adrenaline rushing.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Now notice, we can talk about what it feels like to have an adrenaline rush. That's really a physical phenomenon, isn't it? Because adrenaline is it's not a hormone, right? What is it? Does anyone know offhand exactly what kind of chemical it is? I've forgotten. Goes in your system and it starts kicking other things into gear. When you have an adrenaline spike, what else happens to your body? What happens to your heart?
Racing.
Starts racing, not just beating faster, but racing. This is why they use adrenaline to revive people after overdoses, get their heart started again. Also used for nerve agent poisoning. When I was in the Army, do they still do all that nerve agent, like, you know, training you what to do with the auto injectors? And
They haven't taught us that yet. They do.
well, they should, because it's important. One of the things they're going to teach you to do is how to inject yourself with adrenaline, so that you can keep yourself from dying. You know, after you inject yourself with the other thing that neutralizes the nerve agent, which also screws you up a bit too. People who have done it said it gets them kind of high, woozy. So adrenaline. What else happens when adrenaline floods your body? Heart starts racing. Anything else happen to you? I get the shakes. Yeah.
You enter like fight or flight mode.
Okay, so what does that mean? In part that's
Capable to
mental.
do things that you're usually not physically. Like you're faster, you can lift.
Your body is primed, yeah, to do faster movements. The muscles can twitch faster. You're not going to be like Hulk strong, most likely, you know. But people do amazing things under the influence of adrenaline, and then afterwards they crash, right? Because your body can't sustain that. And part of what's going on there is things that you are sensing mentally, perceptions that you are having about what's going on with your body. And part of it is sort of subterranean. It's just going on in your body. You're not observing your heart beating faster, but you can feel the effects of it. So these are all good examples of how the interplay works here. And there can be a lot of back and forth. You see the spider, that's a physical action. It goes into your brain, it processes it, it says, holy crap, this is going to bite me. And then, you know, that produces a physical reaction. And then, you know, you say, wow, I don't like the way this feels. The physical reaction, I better get myself under control. You start doing some breathing exercises. There's a whole possible cycle here of interaction between the mind and the body. But it's very important to be able to distinguish between the two of them in order to understand how these work together. So Descartes thinks of this in terms of what he calls passion. And passion is an old-fashioned term that means being acted upon. So when you are having a passion of the soul, something is acting, or of the mind, something is acting upon the mind. And this could work one of two ways, because what can actually act on the mind? The body can act on the mind, and it could be that something is acting on the body from the outside. Like when you're hearing my voice, I'm speaking, I'm producing sound waves, you're taking those in through your body, through your ears actually, and then nerves, and then that is going to your mind. So in a way, I'm acting on you, but it's really I'm acting on your body, which is then acting on your mind. So that's a passion. The mind can also act upon itself. Like, for example, what I'd like you to do right now is imagine a orange turkey, since Thanksgiving is coming up. Everyone doing that? Probably, you know, picture like a turkey-looking thing and you just plop the color orange on it. Now imagine, all of you like eating turkey at Thanksgiving? I know a few of you are vegetarians, so imagine tofu in that case, or something similar. Now imagine orange flavored, like with orange rind. Can you imagine that? Can you make yourself think that? Can you sort of almost smell the orange rind? You know what's going on there is your mind is actually making itself do something. That was through your own will, your own choice. Whenever you make your mind do something that you want it to do, or you're following instructions that you want to follow, because you could have said, screw you, Dr. Sadler, you're not going to make me think of turkey, you know, or something like that. Or I hate orange, you're not going to make me think of orange. Whenever you're doing something like that, you are acting upon yourself. You are both active and passive at the same time. Descartes says we're not going to call those passions because you are active at the same time. So what are we going to call passions of the soul? It's going to be the stuff that has to do with the body acting on the soul or the mind. But not every way in which the body is acting on the soul or the mind, because we have some things that we don't want to, confuse with emotions. Like you hearing me right now is not an emotion, right? I hope you don't say it like that. If you did, you'd be psychotic. And there's no way you could possibly make it here at Marist if you were actually psychotic. Or there might be some other DSM disorder that I haven't looked at the DSM-5, so maybe there's some other disorder that would fit as well. What we call emotions have to do with a certain way in which the body acts on the mind. Not perceptions, not habits that have been established in the body, not memory, which is actually the mind working on itself, but feelings. So that's what we're going to be looking at with this entire work. And I'm going to skip through quite a bit of the text because some of it is not particularly useful for you anymore. Unless you have a curiosity about ancient medicine or stuff like that. Nobody believes that the heart works the way that Descartes was thinking that it worked, and that it's carrying heat or anything like that. Nobody believes in animal spirits anymore. And we don't even believe that there's a little part of the brain that kind of bounces from side to side, and that's where the mind and the body interact. We have to supplement that with a better way of understanding the mind-body interaction. But there's a lot in here that we do want to look at as far as Descartes' model, because Descartes' model is a very attractive one. If you want to think that you have a mind distinct from your body or your brain, if you want to think that your consciousness is not just a matter of brain chemistry and electrical impulses, then this might be more attractive to you. But then you want to figure out, well, how do these things actually work with each other? So I'm going to skip over all this stuff about how organs work and all of that, and the spirits, and I'm going to skip all the way ahead to the soul's functions, section 17. He says, now that we've looked at all the things the body can do unaided, to the body by itself, it's easy for us to see there's nothing in us that we must attribute to our soul except our thoughts. There's two main kinds of thoughts. Actions of the soul, like remembering, willing, thinking, and passions of the soul. The ones I call actions are all our volitions, all the things that we will. When you decide that you want to think about something, you are actually choosing to think about it. Part of your mind is your will. And when you decide to sleep in, that's you choosing to sleep in. When you decide to get your butt out of bed, that's you choosing to do that. If you let the snooze go 2 times but not 3, because 3 would mean that you're a layabout and 2 is A-OK, that's you choosing. It says, on the other hand, our various perceptions or items of knowledge can be called the soul's passions in a general sense. So perceptions, but also feelings, are coming in from the outside. And he talks about the will. All I want to emphasize here is that the will goes out from the mind to the body. Everyone raise your hand right now. Okay, you just acted with your will, and you acted on your body. Now think about raising your hand. Now you just acted in your mind, using the will. Easy enough to get, right? Perceptions. What are perceptions? Sense things are coming in. Some of the perceptions that we have are actually coming through our sense organs. Some of them are internal to us, like when you feel hunger in your body. It's not like your skin is involved somehow, or your eyes are involved. You have internal perceptions as well, right? We also have imagination. Imagination is taking place in the mind's part, but it's taking the images that you've stored up from your experiences. Again, use the spider thing. The fact that you could actually, say, big as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, you have to have some imagination of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And for any of you to make sense of that, you have to have some memory of something connected with dinosaurs, right? So your mind is doing that stuff all the time. Now, Descartes talks about some imaginings being caused solely by the body. Here's where it gets kind of interesting. So we have the body and the soul. Where do they actually hook up together? Where do we think they hook up together? Do they hook up in your belly? Your mind is in your belly? Some people kind of think that, yeah.
I was thinking it's the brain that's kind of like the pathway between things.
Exactly. So our view and Descartes' view are pretty similar. You notice that he rejects another view that says that it's the heart, the physical heart, where emotions are taking place or perceptions are taking place. People were kind of hazy about this for a while. Aristotle actually, and this is going back 2 millennia, right? Aristotle didn't really know what the brain did. He thought it was kind of like a cooling system. Because, if you look at it, and you look at like a radiator, not that they had radiators back then, it kind of looks sort of like that kind of function, right? He didn't actually realize that the brain was so important. By Descartes' time, they did. They had weird ideas about animal spirits and, springs and pulleys and stuff like that. We know that that's not the case, but he was onto something. The brain sends impulses. And so that means that what's going on with the brain is really important. Does the brain do stuff on its own? Can it produce imagination of things without you choosing to do it, without you willing to do it? No, not at all. What happens when you dream? Are you choosing your dreams? I know I'm not, because if I did, I'd choose a hell of a lot better dreams rather than the puzzling things that I wake up from and think there must have been some meaning to it, but I can't figure it out, And when you wake up from a good dream and you say, that was a good dream, I'm going to go back and dream that dream some more. Does that work? Does it work for any of you? No? If it does, let me know how to do it, because I would do that. I have good dreams occasionally that I'd like to revisit. What about bad dreams? Do you control whether you have a nightmare or not? To some degree. Don't watch a horror movie right before you go to bed. That probably helps, right? So your brain does do some things on its own. Does your brain ever do things in your waking life that produce things in your mind? Maybe imaginations, maybe feelings that you didn't choose. Sure. That's why people get depressed. You can say to somebody, snap out of it. Just will yourself not to be depressed. That doesn't work. If you do certain things, that will help you out. But you might actually have a chemical imbalance in your brain. And if that's going on, that's where medication might help. That's why we give people antidepressants, at least some of the time. Sometimes we actually just give them to get people, out of the office. But some people actually need them, Similarly, some people need anti-anxiety medication. Interestingly, some of these things can be used for multiple things. Wellbutrin can be used to help people quit smoking, but it's packaged under a different name and given a different color for the pill. It's something that starts with X, I think. We're going to see. All right, so the brain is really important. What's going on with the brain can affect what's going on with the body. And here's where we want to buy into Descartes' viewpoint about the brain a little bit, just so that we can get off the tarmac, so to speak. We're skipping ahead a little bit. This is to part 25, where he says, the perceptions we relate to our soul. So perceptions that we relate to our soul are those whose effects we feel as being in the soul itself. You notice I'm always like doing this, because we do this metaphorical body thing about, you know, like maybe the soul is here or something like that. Really, I should be doing this because the brain is the joint. But, I mean, you could do it anywhere you want because the soul is sort of equally spread throughout the body, Descartes says. It's connected with the entire body. There are some things you feel in the soul and you don't feel in the brain or the body particularly. They're caused by what's going on in the brain. And there are certain effects that happen with the body. And those are passions. Those are emotions. He says, these include the feelings of joy, anger, and the like, which are aroused in us sometimes by the objects that stimulate our nerves, sometimes also by other causes. Now, all of our perceptions are, he says, indeed passions with respect to our soul, but we want to restrict the term passion to signify only perceptions that relate to the soul itself. So, what would these be? Now he gives you a definition in section 27. He actually titles that definition of passions of the soul. He says, having considered how the passions of the soul differ from its other thoughts, it seems to me we can define them generally as perceptions, sensations, or commotions of the soul. It tells you what kind of thing they are, right? Perceptions, sensations, or commotions of the soul, which, now here's a differentiation of the definition, we relate particularly to the soul, not to things outside of us, but to the soul, and are caused, maintained, and strengthened by some movement of the spirits, the animal spirits. So Descartes thinks that the body and the brain are connected through the nerves, you know, and what the nerves do is transmit the animal spirits to different parts of the body, you know, to the muscles to make them contract, expand, to the eyes, you know, to have them take in information, to look around at things, to the heart, the liver, the spleen, all these other things, right? We have a similar idea of the body. The brain is sort of at the top. It runs the show. And what's going along the nerves is not animal spirits, but electrical impulses. Your heart is beating because your brain is telling it to beat. It's not going to keep beating if your brain doesn't, some part of your brain doesn't keep telling it to do that. And it's electrical impulses. That's why a pacemaker can, you know, be implanted and it can make it beat. And that's why if you take somebody's heart out, you could and you disconnect it from the brain, you could still make it beat by giving electrical impulses, right? So get rid of the animal spirits notion and substitute in there. Passions are related particularly to the soul and are caused, maintained, and strengthened by some action of the brain with the body. Does that make more sense? Your body is this very complicated machine. The brain is sort of like the control center. It works through electrical impulses, also through hormones, things along those lines. So the passions of the soul, the emotions that you feel, are felt particularly here. They're not like perceptions where you say, you know, you perceive this piece of chalk right now. There's an external object that your eyes are tracking. Your anger is inside of you. Your joy is inside of you. It can be caused by external things, but it's not like a perception where it relates to the external thing that way. Does that make sense? This is something important to grasp. Is everyone okay? So he gives you an explanation here. He says, and I'm going to skip over the first part. He says, I add they relate particularly to the soul to distinguish them from sensations of external objects or to sensations within our body like hunger, pain. They're caused, maintained, and strengthened by some movement of the spirits, or in our case, electrical impulses, to distinguish them from things that we actually choose, things that we will. Again, you can't will to make yourself happy, sad, angry directly. You can will to think about things that will make you angry, to think about things that will make you sad. But that's not the same thing as like willing that feeling directly. I'm going to skip over like the soul is united to all the parts, and I'm going to skip over the thing about the pineal gland, unless any of you are particularly interested in that. Descartes, here's the long and short of it. Descartes thought there's a little part of the brain, and it's the one part that, it's not, you've got two hemispheres of the brain, and both of the hemispheres, look like they have more or less the same equipment. So, they must be for, equal parts of the body or something like that. There's one part of the brain that's just all by itself, this little pineal gland. Descartes thought of it as getting moved by the animal spirits in different ways. Think of a joystick or a controller, right, for a video game. And now imagine that joystick can make everything on the screen happen, which is the case, right? And it really is much more like a joystick than a complicated controller with buttons and stuff like that. Because all it does is kind of bounce around. I suppose it takes on different configurations as well. It can be pushed in this part, pushed in that part. So maybe it is more like a controller with a couple buttons. Now, those of you who play video games, think about all the different things you can get to happen in that game by use of those very simple commands, by doing different combinations of them, right? It's quite a few things. Think about fighting games, or like first-person shooter games, right? You go forward, go backwards, go side to side. How do you duck in games? Usually hitting a button, right? Or something along those lines. How do you jump? Every game you have to be able to jump. How do you access your inventory? There's probably another button, right? This is why a lot of them use keyboards. There's not that much that you can do, though. It's very difficult to see just how this is supposed to work in real life in Descartes' account, how one, essentially, joystick or controller is supposed to get all of that information to the brain. I mean, just look around this room for a minute, everyone. Look at all of your classmates' clothing. All the different colors. All the different shapes, sizes, the way things are worn. Your brain is like processing that. This is an easy task for your brain to do compared to some of the things that it does routinely. This is simple stuff. Could that really be done by just this little gland bouncing around? Probably not. Could it be done by a massive computer stored away in your skull that has literally millions of connective parts that can actually rewire itself, grow, replace parts that have gotten damaged, and interact with all the rest of the body through electrical impulses, hormones, and various other mechanisms? Probably. That's probably big enough to get you what you need over here. This task of looking around and noticing what everybody's wearing, and what colors it is. That's what's involved when you're feeling things. Your feelings are caused by what's going on in your brain and how your mind takes in the interaction with your brain. So when you're feeling sad, something is happening indeed in your brain. There is a physical aspect to sadness, and then it goes into the rest of your body. When you're feeling happy, similarly. When you're feeling angry, when you're feeling surprised, when you're feeling disgusted. All these sorts of things are happening both in your brain, where electrical impulses are firing and all sorts of cool stuff is going on that we can look at through MRI machines. And this is more what you are actually feeling the emotion. It's caused because your body and your soul are united to each other. I suppose, if you believe, Descartes doesn't really talk about this much, but if you believe that the soul will survive after death, the only way that it could feel something like emotions would be reawakening them in memory. And they wouldn't be that strong. They would be like what he calls shadows or imaginings. So I'm going to skip over the pineal gland thing. Let's get to discussing how passions are caused in the soul. He says, he's got this example of fear. So let's use the fight and flight response as an example. He talks about seeing some strange and terrifying sight. If it's closely related to things that have previously been harmful to the body, spiders are harmful to the body. What else is harmful to the body? What would scare you if I brought it to the classroom right now? What if the classroom, like, I close the door and lock it, and suddenly the classroom starts filling up with water? Will that scare you? At first you'd be like, oh, what the hell is this? But then you'd be like, oh crap, we're going to drown. Now why is that scary? Yeah. Hmm? But that's very, very broad. Why is water rising like that scary?
Because we need air,
Yeah.
water, so it rises.
Every one of you has probably experienced being short on breath and what it's like to suffocate a little bit. Maybe some of you more than others. Maybe some of you got close to drowning at one point. You know, you bit off more than you could chew with swimming, or you got into some closed off space, you know. Your body remembers that. It remembers it through your brain. And your mind also has that stored away in the what Descartes calls the warehouse of memory, right? And so something scary happens, and it triggers some associations, and your brain says, danger, death, you know, and we are afraid of that. So we start feeling the feeling of fear. Now he says, in some, this passion of anxiety is followed by bold defiance. When we talk about the fight or flight response, sometimes we actually fight, right? If you feel you're up to the thing, you struggle against it. If you feel that you're not, then you get the hell out of there. You panic, as you said. If you're stuck in a closed room with no exit and the water's rising, it's hard to see where you're going to run to. But people do. They run around. You know, they feel fear and terror, like you said. And things happen to our body, like he says with this. When we have the fight or flight response, I don't know if you guys know this, but blood flows away from the extremities because you're getting ready to get cut. And you're getting ready to minimize blood loss. And your brain, your mind is not doing that. Your brain is doing that. Your whole mechanism that is your body. Wonderful machine that we have. You're also having adrenaline flow through your system. Sometimes people throw up. Digestion stops. All sorts of things kick in. That's why it's good not to be panicked all the time, because imagine that happening to your body constantly. Wearing out the machine, right? So now Descartes says, how does this happen? Why does it affect different people differently? He says, how does a single cause arouse different passions in different people? He says, the same impression that the presence of a terrifying object makes on the brain and causes fear in some people may arouse courage and boldness in others. That's because the brains are not all constituted the same way. Our brains are set up somewhat different from each other, depending on what our experiences are, depending on what our temperaments are, depending on what we actually choose to do. Can you change, if you're a kind of fearful person, can you change that through deliberate practices that you choose through the will with how you think about things? You can't, actually. You can choose to do things like take 10 deep breaths, and then you feel less anxious because you're using your will to do something with your body, which then affects your mind. Now Descartes has an explanation for why we feel things the way we do as well. He says, the main effect of every human passion is to arouse the soul and make it will the body to move in the way the passion prepares the body for. So when you get angry, what is your brain, or what is your mind getting your body ready to do? What are the sort of things that
When you get angry,
yeah,
I guess fight.
to fight, yeah. Maybe with words, maybe, you know, with gestures, you know, we puff ourselves up and we watch guys push each other at the bar, you know. That's angry behavior. What is your body getting you ready to do when you feel desire? To go after the thing that you want, right? What is your body getting you ready to do when you feel this what Descartes calls this basic feeling of amazement or wonder. To shut up and pay attention. That's why your eyes get big, you know, and you actually stop doing things. Now, I've been mentioning this over and over again here. Descartes makes it very clear. The soul can't control the body directly in a lot of respects. You can raise your arm. You can't immediately stop your anger or make yourself feel joyful or make yourself stop feeling sadness. What you can do is do this indirectly, he says. You can think about things. You can bring certain things into your internal vision, so to speak. You can imagine things. You can choose not to do certain physical behaviors, which then eventually will make you feel different ways. He says, our passions can't be aroused or suppressed directly by the action of our will, but only indirectly by our representing to ourselves things that are usually joined with the passion we want to have or opposed to the one we want to fend off. So if you want to feel happier, Descartes would say you need to think happy thoughts. You need to think to choose. You need to choose to think about things that are actually happy, and not, sort of tell yourself that this is nonsense or, stupid or things like that, because that's already negative thoughts, right? Those are judgments about that. He says it's not enough to have a volition to do so. We have to set ourselves to think about the reasons, objects, or precedents that have to do with the thing. In the case of fear, if we want to feel less afraid, we need to think about the reasons, objects, or precedents which argue that the danger isn't great. So, when you're afraid of something, here's a great example. How many of you were shy at one point, like in middle school or high school, with respect to people that you were attracted to? Do you remember calling people on the phone? Is that still something people do? You like somebody, so you call them on the phone, talk with them for a while. You don't tell them you like them, right away. You talk about everything else under the sun. Is this something you went through? Do you remember the first couple times, if you're kind of shy, how hard it was actually just to dial the numbers? And then it starts ringing and you're like, hold, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? All this stuff starts kicking in. And then, after a while you get a little bit, more confident with it when you've done it a few times and the world hasn't, fallen apart. But you feel that sensation of fear or anxiety. Now, imagine that you had a nice uncle or aunt that was like trying to help you out, and they could see how nervous you were about this sort of thing. And they said, here's what I want you to do. Just, think about this. Everybody goes through this. When I was your age, I had the same experience, and it turned out okay for me. You call a few times. Don't even worry about what you're going to say, because people get themselves in a loop. What am I going to say? I hope they don't think I'm stupid. You can represent these things to yourself in such a way as to calm yourself down. And then, what's most likely to happen? If you're actually calm and you're not, afraid, you're not going to stutter on the phone. You're not going to say stupid things just to fill up the silence spaces. It's probably going to be a better conversation, and then you come out of it feeling a bit better, right? And all of that is, this interaction between mind and body in terms of passions. Now, he asks an important question here. If this is the case, why don't we have full control over all of our passions, all of our feelings? If we can, in fact, intervene in them, why don't we? And there's two answers to this. So the first one is pretty simple. There's a lot of crap happening over here that we don't have any control over whatsoever. If you got nervous about talking with somebody that you're attracted to on the phone, there's probably a lot of different things going on in your mind that have to do with your experience, that have to do with your temperament. You don't have a ton of control over that sort of stuff, even if you do sort of exercises to try to calm yourself down or change your habits and behavior. It's not 100% guaranteed. There's always going to be stuff sort of impinging on this side. Your brain does weird stuff, too. It always does, it always will, your entire life. A human being is kind of mysterious. So there's that side. What about the other side? How well do we know our own minds? How much discipline do we actually exert on our own minds? I mean, maybe before today you never actually had the thought that through my own will I can choose what I'm going to think about. Maybe you saw your mind is sort of passive. It's getting bounced around from object to object, person to person, task to task. You actually have a lot of control over that, but it takes a long time to develop. So we have a lot of issues. The other thing that he brings up, we need to have the right theory. If we don't actually understand what we're doing, how many of you have ever taken machines apart that you didn't really understand because you wanted to fix it when you were a kid? Any of you do that sort of thing? And you put it back together and you have what we call spare parts because you couldn't figure out how everything fit back in together. And that's a problem because sometimes those parts are necessary for it to work. That's an example of what Descartes says is not having the truth, not having the correct information. How many of you, when you put things together, follow the instructions? You notice I don't put my hand up because I don't follow the instructions until I get baffled, and then usually I have to backtrack because I've already screwed something up. Dumb, stupid behavior. By now I should know better, right? But I notice hardly any of you raised your hands either. The instructions are actually providing you with the blueprint for how to do things right. What we would need over here is some sort of set of instructions for how the soul or the mind works and what we ought to be willing. We would also need some instructions for how our body and our brain work. If we have the wrong theory about it, we're liable to screw things up, aren't we? Like if we think, for example, that falling in love is actually, dangerous and could kill you, the way that some people did think about it, then we're going to fear falling in love, and we're going to guard everybody else from falling in love. We could go down the list about these sorts of things. So that's where he leaves off with part 1. Part 2, we're going to go into the number and types of the basic passions, and there's a lot of material there. So make sure to go over it. It's going to seem kind of tedious at the first read, but then after the second read, you're going to be like, oh, now I see how these things fit together. But this is the basic model that he's using. So you want to keep this in mind